Coming up, crisis for 1 million displaced Lebanese. But first, retirement villages are marketed as the perfect solution. Can't get out. Tonight, Adele Ferguson exposes the great retirement village financial trap.
Communities built for retirees are marketed as independent, safe and fun. They're spruiked as a cheaper option for housing, but as affordable as they appear on Master.
Living in a retirement village has been fantastic.
We have a lot of laughs.
I believe my mother's lost all her life savings.
Marketing jingles lurks a darker underside.
But it's like robbery.
A form of corporatised elder abuse. I can't believe my mother's lost all her life savings.
When Lynette Anderson's mother suffered a series of strokes, it was time to sell the home at a Living Choice retirement village, which had cost her $564,000 in 2015.
How did you feel when you saw that bottom line figure that you're likely to get?
I felt sick. I had to read through it more than once. I got my husband to read through it. I emailed it to my brother and said, can this possibly be right?
Retirement villages charge residents a string of fees when they leave. Some can be so big they can eat up a lifetime of savings.
What will you end up with?
$256, I think, $1,000, that's all.
So it's gone backwards?
It's gone backwards by a long way, yes.
One of the charges is an exit fee paid by residents when they sell. Lynette's mother, Ruth, is expected to pay an exit fee of $245,000. But there's more. Most contracts also include a refurbishment fee to prepare the property for sale. In Ruth's case, the fee was huge.
$167,000.
That's the cost?
That's what they're going to take out of Mum's money, yes. But it's a scary figure. It's an astronomical figure, actually.
Lynette and her mother were given an exhaustive list of items that needed to be done.
What state was the house in?
One careful lady living there for 9 years. I might have replaced a few things like the door handles in her kitchen. They've gutted the place.
This was despite a condition report completed by Living Choice, which found most of the home was in a reasonable or fair state. New plaster, tiles and carpet. The bathrooms and kitchen were completely overhauled, even door hinges replaced. And more than $1,000 for a final clean. Double the price of quotes we received for...
Describe it financially.
A disaster. When you buy a home, you don't expect to lose half your money.
730 can reveal Living Choice is also a builder. It provided the quote and it will be paid to do the renovations on Lynette's mother's home. In a statement, Living Choice told us residents are made aware of the costs when entering and leaving. It said it recommends legal advice. And it said a retirement village is not an investment, it's a lifestyle, and new residents are provided a clean, comfortable property. It said construction costs had increased since COVID, but residents can use their own builders if they wish. I've been looking at the retirement housing sector for almost a decade, investigating companies around the country. We've obtained dozens of contracts covering big and small retirement villages, spoken to residents and their families, staff, experts and lobbyists. And we've found some harrowing stories of financial loss from some of our most vulnerable citizens.
The setup is designed to milk as much out of the people who go in there.
Michael McNamara's sister Helen worked hard all her life helping people as a nun, then an educator in disadvantaged communities.
She's always been a really generous person, and her first priority always seemed to be what somebody else needs.
In 2020, she moved into Torrens Grove Retirement Village in Adelaide, which is owned by Retire Australia. But in 2022, she was diagnosed with dementia and left this year.
We found the contract as we were clearing out her unit and moving belongings and things, and it's the first time I'd actually cited the contract. First, this thing is a monster. It's about 70-odd pages long.
The contract included an exit fee of 35% after just 3 years. How it's calculated is shown here in the contract. When he got the invoice, it worked out to be almost $130,000.
There was this algebraic formula. My first response was, how does a 70-plus-year-old person make sense of this? Did she make sense of it?
Notes from her GP show Helen was suffering from cognitive decline 2 years before she moved into the village. Helen's place finally sold last month. She ended up with $236,000 from her original $365,000 investment.
Absolutely disgusted and really disappointed for this outcome from Helen's point of view, because she's had to go into an aged care system that costs nearly $500,000 just to get into in a not-for-profit. There's going to be some bridging finance that's got to go on there from her pension. And it's just grossly unfair.
Retire Australia apologised that its explanation of the exit fee didn't meet the expectations of Helen's family. It said it clearly outlines how the fees are calculated in its marketing and sales material. It said Helen's $365,000 ingoing contribution was more than 30% less than the local median house price. It said when she moved into the village, she was articulate and asked questions about the purchase and process. Dr. Tim King isn't surprised. The retired actuary built a calculator with Macquarie University to help retirees compare different retirement village contracts.
And what did you find?
The contracts are very complicated. People don't really understand what they're signing up for.
When do the real costs become apparent?
They usually become apparent at the end of the life of the deal when the person exits from the village.
You've described them previously as a cunningly disguised rip-off.
Yes.
Do you stand by that?
Yes, I do.
Dr. King has studied hundreds of contracts and spoken to many residents and says most of them go backwards financially when they finally sell.
The amount they get back is really minuscule compared to what they put in at the beginning, generally speaking.
Retirement villages are one of the only property types where people lose money. The losses are even starker when we compare them to the median price of a home in the same suburb. It's not just a financial hit. People can literally lose some of their rights with these contracts. Some operators can decide what pets you can have, how long your visitors can stay, and even request medical examinations and evict those deemed to need extra care.
Most people have a wonderful, positive, uplifting experience in a retirement village.
Daniel Gannon is the head of the Retirement Living Council, which is part of the powerful Property Council. He represents owners and operators of retirement villages.
What we know is that compared to people not living in a retirement village, there are some wonderful health and happiness benefits that can be generated. Research now shows that compared to people not living in retirement villages, people can be 41% happier, 15% more physically active.
It's called independent living. That's what the marketing is. Some of the contracts are very restrictive. Does that sound like independent living?
Well, it is independent living because people are looking for a particular lifestyle. They're not purchasing an investment property, they're buying a lifestyle with all sorts of social activities, events and engagements that are keeping people healthier and happier for longer.
Do you think the contracts are simple enough?
We want simpler contracts. For a long time there's been too much confusion, too much complexity in these contracts. They have reduced in size over the last 5 to 7 years. Some operators have reduced their contract sizes by up to 30%. There is still way too much complexity in these contracts.
Because the people we've spoken to, they may be happy while they're living there, but they get a shock when they're leaving. I wanted to show you one contract which is a member, and it's also signed up to the Code of Conduct. Just have a look at the exit fee. It's an algebraic formula for an exit fee.
Yes.
That doesn't look like a simple contract.
Our advice to prospective residents of retirement villages is always to obtain independent financial and legal advice. We don't want anyone.
Do you think that is acceptable in a contract for anyone?
Like with any big life decision, any big purchase, it is always advisable to get independent advice to make sure that you understand any financial obligations.
So you think
that
we can
signing up
put
to.
algebraic formulas into contracts, and as long as people try and find independent financial advice, that's okay?
As an industry, we want simpler contracts. We don't want consumer-unfriendly contracts.
Do you think that's consumer-friendly?
We don't want things that people can't understand.
Do you think it's consumer-friendly?
That is quite a complex component of that contract, absolutely. And what we are calling for right around the country with every state and territory government is for simpler contracts. We don't want dissatisfied customers. We don't want unhappy people. We don't want confusion at any time of this process. So if there's any way that we can simplify and further simplify contracts to make sure that everybody understands what they're signing up for, that is a circumstance that we want.
Retirement villages have a voluntary code of conduct. It's designed to create high standards among operators.
Only 1/3 of retirement villages in Australia right now are signatories to the Code of Conduct. That is too low. We want 100%. We want every retirement village to be signatory to that code because that is our commitment to high standards.
Why is it taking so long if it's been in operation for 4.5 years? You're the peak body. What's going wrong?
Look, what I can influence...
Because it's a very weak code, it's voluntary, you haven't got a lot of take-up, and you've got no breaches, and if someone does get breached, there's no financial penalties.
We want to see 100% of villages around Australia
I understand that,
signed up to the Code of Conduct.
But what are you doing to get that?
We are working with operators right across the country to make sure that they understand what our commitment looks like to higher standards and improved and increased professional standards.
Independent federal MP Rebecca Sharkey represents the oldest electorate in South Australia. Her inbox is full of complaints about bullying, punitive fees and restrictive contracts at retirement villages.
Financial aspect of it is a huge price to pay, where people effectively can only buy into it once because you lose, in many cases, up to half of what you've put in a very short period of time. So many people have said to me that they feel very trapped. The contract that they signed was not what they thought it was, and that they feel that they're getting quite an unfair deal, but have no way of remedying that.
Do you think the state and federal governments need to step up?
Absolutely, they need to step up. And in many cases, I see the retirement village contracts as a form of corporatised elder abuse.
Last year, she tabled a motion in Parliament calling on the government to recognise retirement villages as a financial product, a move that would bring them under the watch of the corporate regulator ASIC.
You think you're buying a property, but you're not. You're just getting a right to occupy. So that's why I think if we had at least some ASIC protections, if we had the Federal Assistant Treasurer looking at this deeply, the Parliament looking at this deeply, I think we would be able to ensure that we had a fairer deal between the resident and the retirement village corporations.
Colleen Green discovered her mother will be charged fees including an eye-watering 60% exit fee by Tranquil Waters in Queensland.
And the bottom line, she's only going to get about 20% of her money back.
It's left the family in a financial quagmire.
She has my disabled brother living with her and we're stuck. The predicament we're in now is if we sell her place, we actually don't have very much money left over.
Did she have any idea about the contract when she signed?
I don't think so. I didn't understand it. It's not like a normal contract when you buy a house. This was just an absolute minefield.
Her mother paid almost $384,000 to enter in 2013. And how much will she get on the way out?
About $81,000. I was devastated. I just thought, how can this be possible?
It means 89-year-old Joan won't have enough money to pay for a room in aged care.
Which she will now go as a concessional, so the government will have to pay for her. And as I said, we're not sure what will happen with my brother, but we will try and work something out for him.
I feel very, like I've been robbed, I suppose. Well, my name is down at a place down the coast. If you've got the money, you can go in any time, but I can't. I've got to wait for them to ring me.
It's very sad that you can get to 89 and have lost your life savings.
What's your reaction to that?
It's pretty galling, really, isn't it? Clearly, this lovely lady that needs to go into aged care has nowhere to go. If that story doesn't make other legislators, state, federal, prick their ears and go, we have a problem here and we need to fix this, I don't know what would. I wish her case was unique in that sense, but I fear it's not.
Tranquil Waters didn't respond to questions. Do you think it's fair they end up with $81,000 on the way out? We've gone through many, many contracts, we've spoken to a lot of people, and we can't find anyone who's financially better off on the way out.
Look, we don't want any circumstances where expectations haven't been met. Certainly we don't like to hear about contract confusion.
Do you think people are aware, are they told crystal clear that when they go into a retirement village, they're going to be worse off when they come out?
Look, a home in a retirement village is not an investment property. It's not a vehicle to build personal wealth.
Okay, so
it is a very different model.
We both agree with that, but why is it in your literature and in your messages to government about affordable living, you're saying these are affordable because they're 43% cheaper than a similar like house?
There are various financial and contractual options.
But you're not talking about that. You're talking about it's affordable living.
Well, we do talk about it. We certainly talk to governments about it. There's a lot of contract options for residents. Some people prefer to pay more going in and less going out.
We have spoken to a lot of people, residents, auditors, experts, academics, politicians, and they're saying that there are systemic issues with retirement villages and that things need to change so that residents are properly looked after.
Look, there are no systemic issues across this sector. We do know that there are some residents whose expectations have not been met after they've lived in a retirement village. But there is a lot of regulation.
The elderly people are just being sucked in. I think it's very sad that our society lets this happen.
This poor old mum's got nothing. Anyway.
How can people do this to our elderly people?
Governments need to do better. They set up the regulations and the legislation. And the companies are saying, we're playing by the rules. And I really hope that this provokes some really active discussion and some real movement and change in this industry for the betterment of our aged population.
And there'll be more from Adele Ferguson on this topic in the coming days on 7:30. For the first time since 2006, Israel has hit a target deep inside the Lebanese capital, Beirut. It follows days of Israeli bombing in the country, causing many civilian casualties and killing top Hezbollah commanders, including leader Hassan Nasrallah, one of the most significant figures in the Middle East. President Biden said today that all-out war must be avoided. But Israel says it intends to continue its campaign against Hezbollah. In a moment, I'll speak to the minister in charge of Lebanon's emergency response. But first, here's Jason Om.
Influential and powerful, Hassan Nasrallah was leader of Hezbollah for the past 3 decades. That ended over the weekend when Israeli airstrikes hit buildings in Beirut.
He was a very strong leader to Hezbollah, but also very charismatic. I mean, terrorism or not, he was someone that when he talked and when he addressed the nation or his public, he commanded respect and listening.
But fearful of such a fate, Nasrallah had been in hiding since Hezbollah's war with Israel in 2006.
All these kind of counterintelligence moves have been employed by Nasrallah, but eventually your luck runs out, and it's taken 30 years, but his luck has run out now.
It's been a fortnight of blow after blow against Hezbollah in Lebanon, beginning with the explosion of pagers and walkie-talkies belonging to Hezbollah members. The attacks have been widely blamed on Israel, though it hasn't claimed responsibility. Israel has confirmed its recent airstrikes have killed some of Hezbollah's top leaders. At least 7 are now dead.
It's not just the top layer that's been taken, it's been several layers below over the space of a year, and that's why Israel has been doing it.
It's important to remember that one can kill a human being, but one cannot kill an idea. The assassination definitely was a blow to the military group. However, the idea of the resistance to the hegemony, the American hegemony, or the occupation of Palestine will continue in the mind of that group. And therefore, if anything, I think it's even more dangerous right now.
While Hezbollah's backer Iran has said Nasrallah's death will not go unavenged, some observers doubt Iran would want a direct fight with Israel.
The less likely response is going to be a hard military response from Iran. It's really not going to help Hezbollah overly at the moment. It might have a short-term sugar hit, but they also know that they don't want to expose themselves to Israeli retaliation.
Israel has vowed to keep up its fight against Hezbollah, even as some nations, including the US, call for a ceasefire. In Lebanon, the casualties are growing, with more than 1,000 deaths, according to the nation's health ministry.
Dr. Nasser Yassin is Lebanon's Environment Minister and is currently coordinating the country's emergency response. I spoke to him earlier. Dr. Yassin, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you.
Can you begin by telling us what the situation is on the ground for civilians in Lebanon?
In a couple of hours, the country transformed into a major humanitarian scene. The scenes 48 hours ago, when the southern suburbs of Beirut were hit, and then all the warnings that the Israeli spokesperson was sending created an influx of civilian people, families, kids, women, children, carrying whatever they can and leaving a populated neighborhood in the capital or the metropolitan area of Beirut. It's actually a place where almost 1 million people live there. Highly dense populated people live there, and they had to just leave. And, you know, in 24 hours, we were catering for the displaced from South Lebanon who've been hit for the preceding days and weeks, around 300,000 of them. And suddenly we have to really serve and guide and help around 1 million people now. Around a quarter of them are in collective shelter. We're opening almost every school in the country to become a collective shelter. This is a major humanitarian complex emergency situation that might become catastrophic if nothing happens now. First, to stop this war, and secondly, to provide the immediate support and humanitarian assistance to the Lebanese, as well as to 1.5 million refugees. Lebanon has been hosting 1.5 million Syrians that nobody else in the world actually wanted them. So you can imagine this situation that's becoming more and more complex every minute.
Actually, it's very hard for us to imagine what you've been through in the last few days. Lebanon was already in the grip of a multi-dimensional crisis. Can you cope with what is happening there today?
Nobody can cope with this. Nobody can cope with this. I mean, even the more developed nations, the more places where there's some stability at the level of the state or economy or institutions wouldn't be coping when 25% of the population or 20% of the population have moved in few days. I mean, this is unprecedented. Even in major humanitarian situations in the world, this is becoming unprecedented.
So what's going to happen over the next few days? Is it possible that if there is a break now, or a lull at least, in the strikes, that some of those million people that you're talking about could return home?
Many of them have lost their properties, they're damaged. Thousands of places and households and buildings have been destroyed. We haven't seen a killing machine and the level of destruction and firepower that's happening in Lebanon in the last few weeks. So this is a major challenge and predicament. But actually, there's no even talk of stopping this. Last night, I mean, a few hours ago, we had a hit in the middle of the capital, not even in the suburbs of Beirut. So things are moving fast, unfortunately. There's nothing serious is on the table. Even the level of assistance that Lebanon is getting for a major complex emergency of this size has been very modest until now. So we're seeking all channels and mechanisms at the moment to stop this and to help people on the streets.
And what do you anticipate Israel will do next?
They've been in a mindset of going in an all-out war in the region. Particularly my concern is Lebanon, my country. There's no talk of any political solution or any respect of the UN resolutions, for that matter. I have to be very honest and frank. There are some attempts here and there. Whatever presented last week in New York by President Biden was just, shredded by the Israeli side, shredded by their acts as well as by their whatever they've been voicing.
I want to talk to you about the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, but first of all, in the last war with Israel, Hassan Nasrallah said at the end of that war that if he'd known what the consequences were, he would not have started it. Should he be condemned for bringing this war to Lebanon?
I mean, the war on Lebanon, the Lebanese side has been, from many, many weeks and many months, open for all the proposals that were put, whether last week in New York or the weeks before. Lebanon was clear. The Lebanese government has been in dialogue with different factions in the country that we need to stop this war on Lebanon.
But my question, Dr. Yassin, was about the decisions of Hassan Nasrallah and whether he should be condemned for bringing this war to Lebanon, to your country.
I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of the government. Our concern and full interest now is to protect people from this aggression. I'm not going to go into the analysis of who did and what. I mean, what I see now are Israeli war machine going over Lebanon, killing civilians, no whatsoever immunity for anything, no respect of international humanitarian law, no respect of Geneva Convention. We have tens of health workers, civil defense, government staff were killed in the past few weeks, and the count is happening. We're reaching almost 2,000 people killed in just a few weeks.
Is it not possible for someone in your position to make a simple statement of condemnation of Hezbollah and their role particularly over the last 11 months since October the 7th?
Again, I condemn any killing of any person. I'm against the use of violence for anything. This is not how the world needs to deal with its disputes, conflicts, problems. There is a setup that was put after World War II, which is the UN and the UN Security Council, which has been sidelined for ages. But there's history to what's happening. Israel hasn't been shying away from violating Lebanese sovereignty for decades, Van. We have actually been occupied for 20 years. if you want to go into this analysis, I'm ready to spend hours educating the public about the history of this conflict.
Let me just ask you this question. What do you think will be the impact of the killing of the leader of Hezbollah?
This is a major event. It's a major, let me just rephrase. I think it has a lot of impact, particularly that there will be a lot of dialogue in Lebanon about the day after and how to deal with rebuilding southern Beirut, south of Lebanon, Beqa, but also how to rebuild the state institutions and how to support the Lebanese army in being the official forces to put law and order in the country. I think the discussion has opened, and we need to continue on this.
And just coming back to the suffering of the civilian population of Lebanon, where you started, you say that there is aid coming in, but it's not enough. What is it that you need most urgently from the rest of the world right now?
There's a lot of need for basic items, for food, mattresses, even medical supplies. The hospitals are loaded with injured people. I think any assistance, any basic assistance for a humanitarian situation, they need to be sent. We're doing our share here in the country. The UN agencies are also helping, but they're under a lot of strain to support and to help almost 1 million people.
Dr. Yassin, we wish you the very best over the coming days, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's the programme for this evening. Thank you very much for your company. Good night.